My brother laughed at me for being naive about legal matters. But when I checked the registry, our ancestral land had been transferred to his wife's name. The family gathering became the stage for his downfall. I still remember the morning everything shifted. I was standing in the courtyard, sweeping away the fallen leaves, when a strange heaviness settled in my chest. Nothing dramatic had happened yet, but something in the air felt different, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The sun was warm, the birds were loud, and yet I felt a quiet uneasiness I couldn't explain. It was the kind of feeling my mother used to call a warning without words. I brushed it aside, telling myself I was simply tired, but the feeling stayed with me all day. My life had always been simple. After my parents passed, the ancestral land became more than just soil and trees. It felt like a part of them still lived there. I would walk through the fields and hear my father's voice explaining how each corner had its own story. My mother would talk about the seasons, how the land breathed with us. That land was my comfort, my memory, my connection to everything I had lost. And through all those years I trusted my older brother to protect it just as fiercely as I did. He was the one who handled the paperwork, the meetings, the official matters. I never questioned him. I never imagined I needed to. Growing up, he was the one who held my hand when I was scared of the dark. He teased me for crying during old family movies, but he always brought me a cup of tea afterward. Even when he called me soft-hearted, it felt affectionate, not cruel. I believed he would always look out for me. That belief was so deep, so natural that I never thought to doubt it. But that morning, while sweeping the courtyard, I felt something shifting between us, though I didn't yet know what it was. A few days later, I approached him with a simple question about some land-related papers. I had been sorting through old files and found a document I didn't recognize. When I asked him about it, he laughed. Not a warm laugh, a sharp, dismissive one. "You don't need to worry about these things," he said, waving his hand as if brushing away a child's curiosity. "Legal matters aren't your area. You'll only confuse yourself." It wasn't the words that unsettled me. It was the look in his eyes. There was a distance there, a coldness I had never seen before. As if he wasn't speaking to his sister, but to someone he needed to keep in the dark. I tried to smile, tried to tell myself I was imagining it, but the uneasiness from that morning returned, stronger this time. I didn't push him further. I simply nodded and walked away, but the moment stayed with me. It felt like a small crack forming in a wall I had always believed was solid. A week later, I went to the local market to buy vegetables. The market was always lively, vendors calling out prices, children running between stalls, the smell of spices mixing with fresh produce. As I was choosing tomatoes, an old family friend, Uncle Rafik, approached me. He had known my parents well and often shared stories about them whenever we met. He greeted me warmly, but his expression shifted when he mentioned my brother. "I've seen him at the land office quite often these days," he said casually, though his eyes searched my face. "Everything all right?" I froze for a moment. My brother hadn't mentioned any visits. "I'm sure it's nothing," I replied, forcing a smile. But Uncle Rafik didn't look convinced. He patted my arm gently, the way elders do when they sense something is wrong but don't want to say it outright. As I walked home, his words echoed in my mind. Why would my brother go to the land office without telling me? He always kept me informed before. The uneasiness grew into a quiet worry, one I tried to push aside but couldn't. At home, I began noticing small changes. My sister-in-law, who usually kept a polite distance, suddenly became overly sweet. She brought me tea without being asked, complimented my cooking, and asked unnecessary questions about my day. Her smile felt stretched, her voice too cheerful. It was the kind of sweetness that tasted artificial. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and saw her quickly fold some papers and tuck them under a cushion. She jumped slightly when she saw me, then forced a smile. "Just sorting some old bills," she said. Her hands trembled slightly. I didn't question her, but the image of those hidden papers stayed with me. The tension in the house grew thicker. My brother avoided long conversations. My sister-in-law hovered around me like a shadow. And that uneasy feeling from the courtyard morning grew into something sharper: suspicion. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking. But the small incidents kept piling up, each one adding weight to the growing knot in my stomach. Finally, one evening after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone at the dining table with the old land documents spread out before me. My hands shook slightly as I traced my parents' signatures. I thought about their trust, their hopes, their belief that their children would protect what they left behind. That night I made a decision. I would go to the land registry myself. I didn't know what I expected to find. I only knew I needed answers. The next morning I walked to the office with a tightness in my chest. The building looked ordinary, pale walls, dusty windows, but stepping inside felt like stepping into a storm. I approached the counter, asked for the records, and waited as the clerk searched through the files. When he finally handed me the document, my breath caught. My brother's wife's name was written where mine should have been. The room felt suddenly smaller. The air felt heavier. I stared at the paper, reading the lines again and again, hoping I had misunderstood. But there it was, clear, official, undeniable. The land had been transferred without my knowledge, without my consent. And in that moment, the quiet uneasiness I had been carrying turned into something sharp and painful. A betrayal I never saw coming. The paper trembled in my hands as I stared at the name printed where mine should have been. My brother's wife. Not me. Not the daughter who had walked that land barefoot as a child. Not the one who had held our mother's hand during harvest season. I felt something inside me tighten, as if a rope had been pulled too hard. I stepped outside the registry office, the sunlight suddenly too bright, the noise of the street too loud. My breath felt uneven, and for a moment I simply stood there, trying to understand how the people I trusted most had managed to hide something so important from me. That night, I sat alone at the dining table long after everyone had gone to bed. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were loud. Every conversation with my brother replayed in my mind. His dismissive laugh, his sudden coldness, the way he avoided my eyes. I realized how carefully he had chosen his words, how easily he had guided me away from anything that might raise suspicion. I felt foolish, but more than that, I felt deeply hurt. My mother's voice echoed in my memory, a soft warning she once gave me when I was young. Trust is precious, but keep your eyes open. I had never understood the weight of those words until now. The next morning I returned to the registry office. My legs felt heavy, but I forced myself to walk in with a steady face. I approached the same clerk, a middle-aged man with tired eyes. I need to understand how this transfer happened, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He looked at me for a moment, then nodded and pulled out the files. As he explained the process, I listened carefully, though my hands were cold. I asked questions, pretending to be composed, but inside my heart raced. Each answer he gave felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Signatures, dates, approvals. All done quietly. All done without me. When I stepped out of the office, I felt a strange mix of clarity and pain. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was real, documented, stamped, and filed away. I walked slowly toward home, my mind spinning with possibilities. I needed guidance, someone who could explain things in simple words, someone who wouldn't dismiss me the way my brother had. That afternoon, I visited a retired lawyer who lived near the edge of our village. His name was Mr. Karim, a gentle man with silver hair and a calm voice. He welcomed me into his small sitting room, offering tea before I even explained why I had come. When I finally told him everything, he listened without interrupting. His eyes softened with understanding. "Let me see the papers," he said quietly. I handed them over, watching as he examined each page with careful attention. After a long moment, he looked up. "You have every right to question this," he said. "There are things here that don't look proper." He explained what signatures mattered, what documents should have been shared with me, and how certain steps could indicate wrongdoing. He didn't use complicated terms. He spoke gently, making sure I understood each point. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt a small spark of strength. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't alone. Over the next few days, I gathered more information. I visited the registry again, spoke to another clerk, and quietly collected copies of every document related to the land. I kept everything hidden in a small box under my bed. Each paper felt like a piece of armor, something that protected me from the lies I had unknowingly lived with. One evening, while returning from the backyard, I heard raised voices coming from my brother's room. I paused near the half-closed door. My brother and his wife were arguing, their words sharp and hurried. "You promised it would be simple," she said, her voice trembling. "We need the money soon." My brother responded in a low, frustrated tone, something about delays and complications. I didn't catch every word, but I heard enough to understand their intentions had nothing to do with family or responsibility. It was about gain. It was about using what wasn't theirs. I stepped away quietly, my heart pounding. That moment changed something inside me. Until then, a small part of me still wondered if there had been a misunderstanding. But hearing them speak so openly about money erased any remaining doubt. I no longer felt guilty for questioning them. I no longer felt hesitant about taking action. As the days passed, I began preparing myself for what needed to be done. A family gathering was coming up, a large one where all the elders and relatives would be present. It was the perfect place to bring everything into the open. I spent evenings rehearsing what I would say, practicing in front of the mirror, trying to keep my voice steady. I organized the documents carefully, placing them in order so I wouldn't stumble or lose confidence. At night, I lay awake, imagining how the confrontation might unfold. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I simply wanted the truth to be seen, the truth that had been hidden from me. I wanted to stand up for myself, something I had rarely done in my life. The thought scared me, but it also gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. By the time the gathering approached, I was ready, not fearless but ready. I knew the storm that waited ahead, but I also knew I could no longer stay silent. I could no longer stay silent. That thought stayed with me as the day of the family gathering arrived. The house buzzed with noise long before noon. Relatives filled the courtyard, their voices rising and falling like waves. Children ran between chairs. Women carried trays of snacks, and the men discussed crops and weather. It looked like any other family event, but inside me a quiet storm brewed. My hands felt cold despite the warm afternoon, and every breath carried a mix of fear and determination. When my brother walked toward me, he wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're early," he said, patting my shoulder lightly. His voice sounded friendly, but I could sense the strain beneath it. He didn't know what I had discovered, yet something in his expression hinted that he feared something might slip out. His wife stood a few steps behind him, her smile tight, her fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. She avoided looking directly at me, glancing instead at the guests as if searching for an escape. I watched them closely, noticing details I had ignored before. The way my brother's jaw tightened when someone mentioned our parents, the way his wife flinched whenever anyone spoke about the land. My cousins greeted me warmly, but a few of them exchanged curious looks, sensing the tension I carried. One cousin whispered, "You look worried. Everything all right?" I simply nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. As the afternoon went on, the noise grew louder. Plates clattered, laughter echoed, and the smell of fresh food filled the air. But beneath all of it, I felt a steady pulse of anticipation. I waited for the right moment, the moment when everyone was seated and the room had settled into a calm rhythm. When that moment finally came, I stood up slowly, my heart beating hard against my ribs. "I need to say something," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. My brother looked at me with surprise, his smile freezing in place. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder of documents I had prepared so carefully. The room grew quiet as I placed the papers on the table in front of me. "These are the records from the land registry," I said. "I want everyone to see them." My brother's face drained of color. His wife's hand flew to her mouth. A few elders leaned forward, adjusting their glasses to read the papers. The silence in the room felt heavy, almost solid. My brother tried to laugh, but the sound came out thin. "Why are you bringing this up now?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. I didn't answer him. Instead, I stepped back and let the elders read. Their expressions shifted from confusion to shock. One of them looked up at my brother and asked, "Is this true? You transferred the land without telling her?" My brother opened his mouth, then closed it again. His wife stepped forward, trying to speak, but her voice trembled. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered, but even she didn't sound convinced. My brother finally managed to say, "There were reasons, things she wouldn't understand." The elders didn't accept that. They pressed him for explanations, their voices firm. My brother stumbled through excuses, missing papers, misunderstandings, delays. Each excuse sounded weaker than the last. His stories shifted with every question, and the more he spoke, the more tangled his words became. His wife tried to support him, but her nervous glances and shaky voice only made things worse. Then, just as the room reached its peak of tension, the door opened and Mr. Kareem, the retired lawyer, stepped inside. I had asked him to come, though I hadn't told anyone else. His presence brought a hush over the room. He greeted the elders respectfully, then turned to me with a reassuring nod. I reviewed the documents, he said calmly. There are clear irregularities. She was not informed, nor did she give consent. This transfer should never have happened. My brother's shoulders slumped. His wife looked down at the floor. The elders exchanged stern glances, their disappointment unmistakable. One of them said, "You betrayed your own sister. How could you do this?" I felt a wave of emotion rise inside me, not joy, not triumph, but a quiet strength I had never felt before. For years I had stayed silent, trusting others to do what was right. But now, standing there with the truth laid bare, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the soft-hearted girl my brother used to tease. I wasn't the quiet sister who avoided conflict. I had found my voice, and it was steady. My brother finally looked at me, his arrogance gone. "I didn't think you'd find out," he said softly, almost to himself. "I thought you'd just trust me." "I did trust you," I replied. "And you used that trust against me." The room remained silent for a long moment. Then one of the elders spoke firmly. "This must be corrected. The land belongs to her. It will be returned." My brother didn't argue. He simply nodded, defeated. His wife wiped her eyes, unable to meet my gaze. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks slowly lifted. I felt lighter, not because I had won, but because the truth had finally come into the open. In the days that followed, the paperwork was corrected. The land was restored to my name. My brother faced the consequences of his actions, and though the relationship between us changed forever, I felt no bitterness. I had learned something important. Silence is not weakness. Trust is precious, but it must be protected. And even the gentlest person can rise when pushed too far. As I walked through the fields again, the wind brushing against my face, I felt a peaceful sense of closure. The land felt like mine again, not just by law but in spirit. And for the first time in a long while I felt truly whole.